I'm the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I want to talk about what is for its own sake, or how Sakeism is a humanism. The common obviousness of things arises when their explicit apprehension carries immediate importance for purposes of survival or of enjoyment, that is to say, for purposes of being and of well-being. This is from Process and Reality by Alfred North Whitehead. How should we lead our lives? What should we do? Do we not all ask ourselves this in our quiet moments? I wish to propose an answer, and this answer will seem so obvious as to be laughable. But sometimes the answer is simply that simple. Its simplicity is not a defect. Instead, its clarity is a virtue. But just because it is simple does not make it easy to carry out. Most, if not all, will recognize its reasonableness, but few will be able to go all the way. There have been others who have shown the way. We call them saints. To ask how one should lead one's life is to know that our lives are limited and hence valuable. If one's length of life is unlimited, then one can try out every way of life. But because it is limited, therein lies the conundrum of how one should live it. Such a theory needs to consider what it means to be human, but it also needs to go beyond our base requirements of survival to consider human flourishing. To consider individual flourishing, it needs to consider the individual and how she relates to her community, society, and world. Because a world that is unlivable for others will make her goals likewise unattainable. Necessarily, the theory is not intended to spell out how to conduct all the minutiae of one's life. It should recognize the uniqueness of each person and provide a basis that takes into account their subjectivity, allowing them all the liberty to conduct themselves as they wish. The theory hence assumes that we possess such liberty in the form of an individual agent-caused libertarian free will. If we do not and are completely determined, then there is no meaning to ask what we should do, since whatever we do will happen regardless. Let us then begin by considering the following two propositions. A. What is worth doing for its own sake. B. What is worth doing for its own sake is worth doing. What appear to be two similar statements are in fact different. We do things for many reasons. It may be for the sake of something else rather than for the sake of the thing in itself. For instance, many students pursue a particular discipline in their studies not purely for the sake of acquiring knowledge in that discipline, but because that knowledge will lead to a desirable career. Many workers do their jobs not for the sheer pleasure or importance of that work, but because it pays them a salary. Both groups are pursuing something other than the thing in itself. In the first case, knowledge. In the second case, the work. Their end goal is neither the knowledge nor the work, but the money that results from them. Take away that money and they will lose the motivation to study or work. This is not to say that money is not a legitimate objective. The studies and the work may still be worth doing since it gives a reward, though this reward is extrinsic and not the intrinsic rewards of the studies and work in itself. Hence, proposition A is not comprehensive enough. What is worth doing includes what is worth doing for its own sake, but not exclusively. What is worth doing is a function of its expected rewards, be they intrinsic or extrinsic. What is worth doing for its own sake and for the sake of other things. This leads to the question, why do we, however, desire those other things? Those other things are not desired for their own sake, but as means to an end. The end presumably being things desired for their own sake, which leads us to ask what these things are that are desired for their own sake. What is, or at least should be, our ultimate objective? Aristotle in his Nicomachean Ethics investigates what the end for all that we do is, concluding that eudaimonia, often translated as happiness, human flourishing, or well-being, is that ultimate end, the sake of by which all our actions are ultimately directed towards. When we do something that is not itself the end, it is merely a means towards that end. For instance, when we work, our immediate objective may be to earn a salary, but the money from the salary is ultimately meant to be used for what will give us eudaimonia or happiness. A parent may wish to use that money to fulfill the needs of a family, to alleviate their potential suffering so that they can live well. Or she may use it to buy art material in order to paint, which gives her satisfaction. From those activities, she does not need anything further other than the satisfaction derived from the activities themselves. Let us then consider Proposition B. What is worth doing is worth doing for its own sake. Proposition B implicitly assumes, firstly, that there exist such things that are worth doing for their own sake. It then tells us that because they are worth doing for their own sake, they are worth doing per se. The rewards coming from those things are not extrinsic, not for the sake of something else, but are intrinsic, rewards which it provides itself. There is no need for additional extrinsic rewards, though we do not have to reject those rewards either. Sometimes it may even incur a cost. This cost may be a direct one, such as having to pay for holiday expenses such as flight and lodgings, if holidaying is what is worth doing for its own sake. Even if there are no direct costs, there may be an indirect cost, such as an opportunity cost. For instance, one may enjoy playing the piano for its own sake, with no expectation or hope of ever getting anything else out of it other than the satisfaction received from playing the piano. She may never be able to perform for others, hence giving them satisfaction, or ever earn any money from it. In fact, she incurs direct costs since she has to pay a teacher to teach her to play and to buy a piano so she can practice on it. But there is also an indirect cost because she is devoting time and energy to playing the piano, the same time and energy she could have spent doing something else. Hobbies and passions fall under the category of things worth doing for its own sake, which I will call Sakeism for the sake of brevity, though Fiosism, Fiosism, may be catchier. One way to understand Sakeism is to contrast it with what it is not. What is done for its own sake is not directed at usefulness, efficiency, or profit. Not that objects of Sakeism have to be useless, inefficient, or unprofitable. One may pursue the arts, dance, philosophy, music, drama, stand-up comedy, or serving the community for its own sake, and may be able to make a living from it. Those who enjoy craftsmanship and pursue it for its own sake create pots, vases, or tiles, which may be useful for tea, flower display, or construction. Those who enjoy invention or research and pursue them for their own sake may be able to create something that improves the efficiency of a task. But in the case of Sakeism, these pursuits are not carried out with those intentions or expectations, at least not primarily. They are done for the sake of giving direct satisfaction to its doer. These doers, let us call them Sakeists, may feel that what they are doing is something pure and noble, holy, good and true, according to T.S. Champlin. A quick test for what is worth doing for its own sake is to ask, if it does not generate any instrumental benefit such as usefulness, profit or efficiency, what is still worth doing to me? To rephrase, if one is assuredly self-sufficient, what would one like to do? William Frankener provides a comprehensive list of intrinsic goods: life, consciousness and activity, health and strength, pleasures and satisfactions of all or certain kinds, happiness, beatitude, contentment, etc., truth, knowledge and true opinions of various kinds, understanding, wisdom, beauty, harmony, proportion in objects contemplated, aesthetic experience, morally good dispositions or virtues, mutual affection, love, friendship, cooperation, just distribution of goods and evils, harmony and proportion in one's own life, power and experiences of achievement, self-expression, freedom, peace, security, adventure and novelty, good reputation, honor, esteem, etc. Detractors of Sakeism may argue that in fact the piano playing is not quite for its own sake, but for the sake of the pleasure enjoyed by the player. The pleasure is what is being pursued. This indeed is correct. However, I want to respond with 3 points. Firstly, as already pointed out, there may not be pleasure. The process of pursuing the object of Sakeism may incur costs, direct and/or indirect. Secondly, the results of Sakeism may not even give pleasure. For instance, taking care of one's children or aging parents may be a downright pain, yet be regarded as worth doing nonetheless. But even if it does give pleasure, that does not disqualify Sakeism. T.S. Champlin argues this important third point. It seems that if satisfaction, pleasure, happiness, eudaimonia, joy, is the aim, then it is the true end as Aristotle had explained. How then can there be anything that is done for its own sake, since it is not quite for the sake of the thing, but is instead for my happiness? Champlin thinks it is a case of puritanistic isolationism, where analysis breaks the concept down into component parts to the extent that it loses sight of the whole altogether. Immanuel Kant is a key perpetrator. He tells us that the only acts that can be considered morally worthy are ones that are done out of pure duty, where any satisfaction derived from an altruistic act detracts from the worthiness of the act. Champlin argues that Kant is mistaken. It is as if a musician who has lost pleasure in music nonetheless forces himself to practice regularly and to perform in public, although without enjoyment, in order to qualify as pursuing music for its own sake. Champlin thinks that one who thinks like that pushes things too far and ends up having excluded something we need to keep in order to make sense of what it is to choose a piece of music for its own sake. Using a metaphor of a self-cancelling indicator in a car, he tells us his motto is, "Don't do philosophy with your head under the dashboard." What matters in doing something for its own sake is what it means for the driver and not the mechanic. The mechanic examining the mechanism of the indicator may discover that the indicator has nothing within itself to cancel its own indication, since that depends on the driver returning the wheel towards the center, which then pushes a cam that cancels the indicator. It is not self-cancelling if the self refers to the indicator, since the indicator technically does not cancel its own signal. For the driver, however, it appears as if the indicator has cancelled itself, since as far as he is concerned, he is not interested in how the indication gets cancelled, so long as it does, in whichever way other than a way that requires his active intervention. What matters is on the macro level of the driver and not the micro level of the mechanism. Similarly, what matters in doing something for its own sake is how it appears to the agent and not the something in question. Art for art's sake is not how the art feels about the matter, but how the artist and the beholders feel about the art. The art itself does not have any feelings whatsoever. When we talk about Sakeism, it is about our psychological motivation, which is why understanding what Sakeism is not, that is, understanding it negatively, is clarifying. Useful things bear fruit, whereas liberal things sought for their own sakes tend to enjoyment, surmises Champlin. Where does this leave us? My contention is that when permitting, we should do things for their own sake, that those things that are worth doing for their own sake are the things worth doing. This contention breaks down into 2 parts. The first is, when are we permitted to do things for their own sakes? The second is, what is worth doing for its own sake? When are we permitted? There are many things we have to do which are necessary, that have to be done. When left undone, they cause pain, while when done, they may bring little to no pleasure other than a relief from or avoidance of the potential pain. For instance, we have to regularly empty our bladder and bowels. When we do not, pain develops. What pleasure that we get from it comes from the relieving of pain, though we may also incidentally have some pleasure from the sensory receptors in the urinary and digestive system. For bodily survival, we also have to eat, drink, and sleep. My point is not to deny that these activities can be pleasurable. We even often eat, drink, and sleep for their own sake, though too much of each can lead to pain. Beyond the bodily, there are yet many things we have to do out of a seeming necessity. Work for pay is the common mode for people to earn enough so as to cover the expenses of their needs and more. Like eating and drinking, work in the right dose and done the right way may be satisfying, though there may come a point when it becomes debilitating. There may be also unpleasant aspects accompanying the necessary activity, such as eating broccoli for those who detest vegetables, or having to attend work meetings for those who dislike its time-sapping nature. Yet vegetables and meetings are important components of diet and work respectively, necessary to maintain a healthy body and a functioning organization. Aristotle, the first historian of philosophy, recounts only when almost all the necessities of life and the things that make for comfort and recreation has been secured, is when humankind was ready to seriously embark on philosophy. More recently, Abraham Maslow, in his Hierarchy of Needs, tells us that only after we have met our basic requirements can we move on to higher order things. It is not that those who have yet to meet their physiological requirements do not qualify to seek the higher. They too may wonder about the why and how of things. Yet if much of one's mental bandwidth is devoted to meeting basic needs, there may not be much bandwidth left to pursue higher order things. This is why the first step in a capitalist society is to gather enough to continually meet one's basic needs, and this often comes in the form of a salary-paying job. Yet once we have met the basic requirements for survival, what else should we do? Is the answer then to do what is worth doing for its own sake? What each of us considers worth doing for its own sake is different. For some, it is to raise children to be good people. For others, it is to serve their gods. For some, it is to have as much pleasure as possible. For others, it is to be skilled in their chosen craft. Sakeism can cope with the diversity of our subjectivities. This diversity is in fact what makes Sakeism feasible. If we all dash in the same direction, or chase after the same thing, say playing the piano, then who is going to grow crops, cook food, purify our water, and all the other things necessary for the sustenance of life? Sakeism is also not necessarily selfish. Part of what makes a thing worth doing for its own sake is how it contributes to other people. Consider a person whose goal is to play the piano well for its own sake. Her primary goal is to give herself satisfaction. But in giving herself satisfaction, her playing also may give other people satisfaction in listening to her playing the piano well. If one's goal is to raise children that will turn out to be good people, the goodness of their children contributes to the goodness in society and serve others too, since part of being a good person is to serve the needs of others. However, these are just happy byproducts from the object of Sakeism. The key distinction between Sakeism and other modes of life is that its adherents do what they do, not primarily for profit, but because their object of Sakeism is good to do. It is not that profit is wrong. It is instead a byproduct rather than the main aim. What is good is not necessarily the same as what is profitable. They may coincide, for instance, if one creates a profitable vaccine for a harmful virus, or write a wonderful novel that becomes a bestseller. However, what is profitable may not be necessarily good. Predatory money lending practices, people smuggling, kidnapping and crime may be profitable but are harmful to society. Some businesses may even be legitimate but are harmful. The question of Sakeism will only rise in importance as we move towards a society where people's usual means of attaining their livelihoods become increasingly threatened by automation and artificial intelligence. If the day comes when all labor can be taken over by robot slaves, and we are liberated from the shackles of having to earn a living, will we be lost? Or will we be able to turn towards doing what is worth doing after all, the way the ancient Greeks were able to care for their demos, because they had slaves? For now, Sakeism may seem like a luxury and be suspiciously elitist, reserved only for those whose means far exceed their needs, since who will want to do unpleasant grunt work, necessary as that work may be, if one can instead do what is worth doing for its own sake? Who will want to be a slave to capitalist corporations if not out of sheer necessity? Sakeism does note that we first must meet our basic needs. But even a grunt worker, once she passes the threshold of basic needs, will consider what else is there to do. Sakeism also does not bypass societal laws for those who want to do for its own sake what is deemed illegal, or more importantly, immoral, remain subject to the constraints of society. These laws and mores can make the price for their object of Sakeism too much to pay, or reduce the satisfaction they get from pursuing it. John Stuart Mill's imperative to do no harm even as one pursues one's liberty continues to apply. A proposition that follows from Sakeism is C. What is worth doing is worth doing well. If our satisfaction increases as our ability to achieve our object of Sakeism increases, we will be naturally oriented to enhance this ability to the limits of our natural abilities. For instance, one's pleasure in using a language or playing music increases as one's ability in them increases. If such a pursuit is moral, or at least not immoral, it can elevate societal capability in the object's domain, raising society's resources as a whole. This will have the benefit, though it is a byproduct, that the members of society will then have more resources to draw upon, in turn increasing their ability to pursue their own objects of Sakeism, sparking a virtuous cycle, only reaching its limit when all people, aided by the collective resource, have reached their individual limits. From the current level, which falls short of this aspiration, what we as a society need to do is to ensure that more people are able to meet and exceed their basic needs, so that they have the capacity to pursue whatever things they find worth doing for their own sakes. Comparing Sakeism against the major ethical theories of consequentialism, divine command theory, deontology, virtue ethics, conventionalism, moral exceptionalism, existentialism, and sovereignty may illuminate its value as an ethical theory. The antithesis of Sakeism is consequentialism. Consequentialism calculates the merit of our choices based on their consequences, three important parameters of which are usefulness, profit, and efficiency. As already explained, Sakeism is not primarily concerned with those. Consequentialism is an offshoot of utilitarianism, except utilitarianism is concerned with utility in general, be it in the form of profit or happiness. Hence, Sakeism can be seen as a return to true utilitarianism, where utility is measured not in profit but in happiness. As for divine command theory, if obeying God's commands is part of one's values, it becomes compatible with Sakeism, since Sakeism is subjective and depends on what value one gives to the object of consideration. Kant's deontology is about willing what one chooses to be a universal axiom. While what one deems worth doing for its own sake is subjective, a Sakeist will likely find it agreeable if more people pursue what they feel is worth doing for its own sake. A musician will love it if others too pursue music, though a Sakeist will respect that other people have different values and hence different objects of Sakeism, and as explained, diversity is a valuable trait of the theory, enabling each to find their own happiness. Aristotle's virtue ethics shapes one's values and hence will play a part in a Sakeist selection of her project. Sakeism is fundamentally in line with virtue ethics since it is a pursuit of one's values, though it may disobey Aristotelian moderation as one may do to access what one considers worth doing. This is a danger Sakeists face, since their conviction of the worthiness of their project may lead to obsessiveness. This normally is tempered by decreasing marginal utility, where each additional unit leads to less utility or pleasure. For instance, once one's thirst is sated, to drink more glasses of water will become increasingly tormenting. However, in the case of a project worth doing for its own sake, the more one works on it, the better skilled one becomes, leading to greater satisfaction, greater appreciation of the work, and hence more desire to do even more of it. Even for the most edifying of tasks, physical and mental fatigue will eventually limit its pursuit. Sakeists have to guard against such obsessiveness to prevent burnout and a total exclusion of oneself from other important things in life, such as relationships and fulfilling one's survival requirements. Sakeism may fly in the face of conventionalism, since what is worth doing for its own sake may run contrary to popular or common mores and values. A Sakeist's values are shaped and constrained by the morality and laws of her society, but she may choose projects that are at odds with the popular choice. This, however, is a merit and not a deficiency of the theory, in line with liberal values so long as one do no harm. This brings us to Kierkegaardian moral exceptionalism. If one believes that one's project is of overriding importance, she may choose to disregard convention, but it may be to the point where one defies the law and morality if one believes one's project is beyond the law and morality. Sakeism can lead to saintliness, such as asceticism or martyrdom, since such a Sakeist is willing to see one's belief through to the extent of great sacrifice, and for some, even the sacrifice of one's own life. However, it may also lead to megalomania, where one believes it is justified to sacrifice others for the sake of one's project. A Sakeist must beware such dangerous blurring of the lines, especially to the extent where there are no lines that cannot be crossed. Here, a Sakeist can benefit from taking a note from existentialism. She must continuously revisit her premises and understand that her project should lead to more progress, more freedom for all, and not interfere with the freedom of others just so she can achieve her own aims. Increasing the freedom of others is an existentialist premise, but also a Kantian one, where people must be treated as an end in themselves and not as a means to our ends. Respect for others is vital if Sakeism is to elevate society as a whole. Lastly, I want to consider George Bataille's conception of sovereignty. Sovereignty is for him simply being ourselves and our own masters. A sovereign person is able to be in the moment because she is able to find meaning in the activity of the moment in itself. Bataille asks the same question as this essay: what should we do with our access? He supports the notion of doing things for their own sake, though only to the extent that we are masters of them. Once we allow ourselves to be enslaved to these activities, we are no longer the master. Perhaps one safeguard against Sakeist fundamentalism is to recognize that there are at least several things we each consider worth doing for their own sakes, and not just one. Philosophy is important to me, worth doing for its own sake. But my friends and family are also important, also worth doing things for their sakes. Culture, health, freedom, and peace are also things worth pursuing for their own sake, just to name a few things. We can look to Frankener's list above for more. We are multi-dimensional complex creatures, and so are other people. In order for us to be able to do the things we find worth doing, supporting conditions must be in place. Among them, that others also are able to have the freedom we have to do the things they find worth doing. For instance, a piano player will need a veritable ecosystem of others in order that she can play the piano. Piano manufacturers, music teachers, and piano tuners are closer to the piano playing itself, but she will also need lumberjacks and wood millers to furnish the wood for the soundboards, and the makers of the various parts such as strings, hammers, felt keys, and pedals. Hypothetically, all these people may not require freedom to do their work, but let us not forget the music composers and performers whose work inspires us to want to play the piano in the first place. Arguably, their artistic freedom enables them to create music so beautiful such that it can move us to want to play also. In conclusion, Sakeism provokes us to consider what it is that is worth doing in a life that is limited and thus valuable. What the objects of Sakeism are not the only things worth doing, though those other things may be ultimately for the sake of them. Sakeism is compatible with liberty, individual aspirations, the collective will, and societal progress. It can be a useful appendage to ethical theories, and perhaps if more fully developed, its own ethical theory. The question that remains for all of us is, so what is it that you want to do if freed from the shackles of necessity? What to you is worth doing for its own sake? And if you do know what they are and yet are not acting on them, what is stopping you and how can you overcome these obstacles? Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.